Under a sky washed pale by dawn, the prairie spread in every direction, unbroken except for the faint silhouette of a windmill turning slow in the morning breeze. The earth was dry enough that each step kicked up a soft puff of dust, which lingered in the air like a memory reluctant to leave. She moved through the yard with practiced efficiency, feeding the hens first, then kneeling to fix the loose wire on the goat pen. Her hands bore the faint nicks of someone who worked without complaint. To anyone watching, she was just a farmer's daughter, bare feet in the dirt, hair tied back, face shadowed by the brim of her father's old hat. She heard the rider before she saw him, the muffled thud of hooves against packed earth carrying through the stillness. He came from the south road, a lean figure in a long coat, dust and distance clinging to him. She kept working, but her eyes flicked toward the house when her father stepped onto the porch. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. They met halfway between the yard and the barn, speaking in low voices. The rider's eyes never left her as he passed something, small, folded, into her father's hand. Her father tucked it away in the breast pocket of his shirt without unfolding it, the movement quick and deliberate. The rider turned his horse and was gone without another word. Her father lingered in the yard, his gaze fixed on the southern horizon as though measuring the distance to something he couldn't see. She straightened from her work, brushing dirt from her palms, and waited for him to speak. He didn't. He walked back to the porch, opened the screen door, and disappeared inside. In the barn, the air was thick with hay and the faint tang of oil from old tools. She worked in silence, but her mind wasn't still. She had learned to notice the things her father left unsaid. The twitch at the corner of his mouth, the way his hand tightened when someone mentioned the war, the deliberate silences in his stories. This morning had put that silence under strain. By midday, clouds gathered low in the west, the air carrying the coppery scent that came before a storm. She hitched the wagon and drove into town for supplies. The road wound past fields stripped bare by drought, their furrows dry as bone. Near the river bend, a hawk circled, riding the wind with effortless control. She envied the stillness of its flight. In town, the usual noise of a market day was quieter than it should have been. Folks kept glancing toward the front of the general store, where a small crowd had gathered. She dismounted and tied the wagon, keeping to the shade of the awning as she made her way closer. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of flour sacks and kerosene, but the tension was sharper than the smell. A man stood at the counter, broad-shouldered, wearing a coat too fine for someone passing through, and in his hand was a folded paper he slapped down in front of the storekeep. "You've seen him," the man said, his voice too calm to be anything but dangerous. The storekeep shook his head, eyes down. Behind the man, two others lingered near the door, rifles slung casual but not idle. Their boots were too clean for workmen, their eyes too steady for drifters. The broad man spoke again, slower this time. "Think hard. There's reward for the one who helps." No one in the store moved. Then, from the corner, a rancher she knew, Elias Morn, stepped forward. "You've no business here," he said, voice steady but tight. She'd seen him at church, quiet, never one to start trouble. The broad man smiled without warmth. "I'll decide where my business is." The tension snapped like a pulled wire. One of the riflemen shifted, and in the silence she caught the faintest creak of leather. Elias's hand twitched toward his belt but stopped short. She noticed then the carving on a rifle stock carried by the man nearest the door, a small, curved mark, almost like a crescent broken in half. Something in her chest tightened. The broad man stepped close to Elias, speaking too low for her to hear. Then, without warning, his hand struck Elias hard across the face. The sound was sharp, final. No one spoke. The militia men left without looking back, their boots echoing against the wooden floor. She lingered only long enough to see Elias straighten, blood at the corner of his mouth, his eyes fixed on the floor. No one comforted him. By the time she returned home, the sky had darkened, thunder muttering low. Her father sat on the porch, whittling a piece of wood into something shapeless. When she asked what the men in town were after, his knife paused mid-cut. "Nothing we need be part of," he said. That night, when the rain finally came, it drummed steady on the roof, filling the spaces between the house's creaks and sighs. She waited until her father's breathing in the next room fell into the slow rhythm of sleep. Then she moved quiet as a shadow to the attic ladder. The attic smelled of dust and cedar. Moonlight fell through a narrow window, laying a thin silver line across the floor. In the far corner sat a trunk she'd been told never to touch. The lock was simple. The key had always hung beneath the shelf in the pantry. She opened it slowly. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a rifle unlike any she'd held. Long-barreled, polished with worn smooth by use. The same crescent mark was carved into its stock. She lifted it, the weight settling into her palms like it belonged there. Her thumb found the worn groove along the wood where another hand had rested many times before. For a moment, she imagined the sound it would make, the way the kick would drive into her shoulder. She closed the trunk, locked it again, and set the key back in its place. In bed, she lay awake, listening to the storm pass, her mind tracing the lines of the crescent mark over and over. She didn't know the whole of it yet, but whatever those men wanted, she was certain it was already tied to her. When morning came, the sky was clean and cold, the prairie washed sharp by the night's rain. She went about her chores as she always did, but her eyes kept lifting toward the horizon. Something was coming down that road. She could feel it. Do you want me to move ahead? The morning wind carried a faint chill, the kind that hinted at change even when the sun promised a warm day ahead. She found her father at the table, hunched over a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at nothing in particular. The lines on his face seemed deepened the night before, his eyes fixed on a place far beyond the kitchen walls. He said nothing when she sat across from him, only drummed his fingers against the wood in a slow, uneven rhythm. She wanted to ask about the rifle, about the mark carved into its stock, but the silence between them was too solid to break, without shattering something else. By mid-morning, the air shifted, heavier, expectant. The goats in the pen grew restless, stamping and snorting. She heard it before she saw him. The soft shuffle of boots on dirt, the uneven cadence of a man not moving entirely under his own strength. The figure emerged from the line of cottonwoods beyond the fence, leaning hard on a stick, his coat torn at the shoulder, one arm slick with blood. His face was pale, jaw tight, but his eyes burned with the sharpness of someone still deciding whether to trust or collapse. Her father stepped out onto the porch, the knife from his belt already in his hand. "Keep moving," he said flatly. The stranger stopped, swayed slightly, then spoke in a voice rough from dust and pain. "I need a place to stop, just for the night." "You won't find it here," her father said, starting down the steps. She moved before she thought, coming to stand between them. "He's hurt," she said. Her father's eyes cut toward her, hard as flint. "Hurt or not, there's nothing for him here." The stranger's gaze shifted past her, settling on the porch where the door stood half open. She realized too late that the oilcloth bundle, the rifle, was leaning against the wall just inside. His eyes narrowed. "That mark," he murmured, not to her, not at anyone in particular. "Didn't think I'd ever see it again." Her father followed his gaze, and something cold passed across his face. He stepped forward, knife still in hand, but she blocked him again. "We can at least patch him up," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. In the end, her father let her lead the man to the barn. The wound was ugly but clean, a single bullet through the upper arm, missing the bone. She boiled water, cut the shirt away, and worked in silence as he gritted his teeth against the sting of whiskey on raw flesh. When it was done, he leaned back against the hay bales, sweat beating at his temple. "They'll come this way," he said finally. "Who?" she asked. "Men who call themselves a militia, but they're nothing more than a pack of wolves who learn to walk upright. They're hunting the ones who remember." "Remember what?" she pressed. His eyes flicked toward the rifle again. "A war the maps don't show. A fight fought between the cracks, where the government could pretend it wasn't happening. Your mother," he hesitated, and in the space between one breath and the next, she knew she was about to hear something she had been denied her whole life. "Your mother was one of the last. She could hit a coin from 200 yards. They called that rifle the Widowmaker, and she carried it to the very end." She waited for him to go on, but he closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him under. She stayed there a while, listening to the wind shift outside. The barn would creaking like it knew more than it would say. By afternoon, the quiet broke. Hoofbeats 3, maybe 4 horses. coming down the road at a steady, unhurried pace. She felt the sound in her ribs before she saw them. The riders reined in at the gate. 3 men, the same look as those from the store, the same clean boots, the same hard stillness in their faces. One dismounted, walking to the porch with the air of someone who'd already decided how the conversation would go. "Afternoon," he said, removing his hat. His smile didn't touch his eyes. "We're looking for a man passed through here. Wounded, heading west. Might have stopped to rest." Her father leaned on the porch rail, expression unreadable. "Haven't seen anyone." The man's gaze slid over the yard, taking the water trough, the wagon, the barn. His eyes lingered on the half-closed barn door. "You mind if we take a look around?" "I do mind," her father said. The pause that followed was brief, but sharp enough to cut. One of the men still mounted adjusted his rifle in its scabbard, slow and deliberate. The leader's smile thinned. "Not looking for trouble. Just looking for a man who doesn't belong here." From where she stood by the steps, she could feel the weight of the moment tilting towards something irreversible. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears. She stepped forward, drawing their attention. "We saw a rider this morning," she said, letting her voice carry just enough doubt to sound convincing. "Looked half dead. Went toward the dry creek, past the Miller place." The leader's eyes fixed on her for a long moment, reading her like a ledger. Finally, he tipped his hat. "Appreciate it." He swung back onto his horse, and the 3 of them turned toward the south road. As they rode away, she caught the faintest murmur from the one at the rear. "Looks just like her." When they were gone, she exhaled slowly. Her father was already looking at her, but not with gratitude. His face was tight, his jaw set. "You don't know what you've just done," he said. That night, the barn smelled of fresh hay and something else, fear perhaps or inevitability. The stranger sat against the wall, his arm in a rough sling. "You didn't have to lie for me," he said when she brought him water. "Yes," she answered, "I did." He studied her for a moment, then gave a short, humorless laugh. "Your mother would have done the same." She didn't answer. Outside, the night was deep and still, but she could feel the road drawing the wrong kind of footsteps closer. Whatever she just set in motion, there would be no turning it back. The morning broke with a wind sharp enough to lift the dust in twisting columns across the fields. She found the stranger awake in the barn, his arm bound tight, his eyes following her every movement. He was restless, and she could see it in the way his fingers flexed against his thigh. Her father had left before first light, taking the wagon east, saying nothing of when he would be back. The air felt thinner without him, as if the farm itself had been left unguarded. The stranger asked for the rifle. She hesitated, then fetched it from its hiding place in the attic. He ran his hand along the stock, touching the crescent mark like it was an old scar. "Your mother's eye was steady," he said, "but her patience, that's what made her deadly." He looked at her in a way that made her feel both measured and weighed. "You ever fire one of these?" She shook her head. He motioned toward the back pasture. They walked together, the frost-damp grass bending under their boots. He set a bottle on a fence post and showed her how to brace the rifle, how to feel the breath settle in her chest before squeezing the trigger. Her first shot cracked too soon, the recoil sharp against her shoulder. He corrected her grip, shifted her stance. "Don't fight it," he said. "Let it speak through you." The second shot shattered the bottle clean. She lowered the rifle slowly, surprised at the steadiness in her hands. They trained until her arms ached. He spoke little, but every instruction carried weight. She understood then that he was not teaching her for sport. He was preparing her for something certain to come. By mid-afternoon, they followed the slope down to a canyon she had never seen before. Hidden between weather-worn cliffs was a small camp, 3 tents, a cook fire, and people who turned to watch her with a guarded kind of hope. The stranger introduced them in fragments. A one-eyed woman mending boots, 2 boys no older than 14 cleaning rifles, a man with skin dark in the prairie soil, sitting cross-legged and sharpening a knife. Survivors, he called them, people left standing after the old war had been scrubbed from the books. They spoke in low tones about the militia, about a man they called Mercer, the officer-turned profiteer, who had led the massacre in the border settlements and had been hunting the last witnesses ever since. The stranger's wound, they told her, had come from a skirmish 2 days past, when Mercer's men raided another hideout. She listened, piecing together the fragments until a picture formed. Her mother had been part of the last stand against Mercer's unit, nearly ending him before disappearing. The rifle she now carried had been there, heavy in her mother's hands, spitting fire in the smoke of that battle. The militia's crescent mark was no accident. It was a brand worn with pride by the men who had survived her. By the time they returned to farm, the sun had already sunk low. The first thing she noticed was a smell, smoke, acrid and heavy, rolling in from a barn. She broke into a run, the stranger close behind. The doors hung open, the interior blackened. Her father lay just beyond the threshold, slumped against a scorched wall, blood streaking his temple. His voice was hoarse when he saw her. "They took him," he rasped. Her stomach turned to ice. "Who?" "The man you brought here. They found him." He coughed, wincing. "Said they'd come back for you." She helped him inside, cleaned the wound on his head, but his eyes kept drifting toward the rifle propped in the corner. "This was never meant for you," he said. But she could feel it now, the shape of the choice pressing in on her. She was already part of this, whether she had meant to be or not. After he fell into a fitful sleep, she packed light. The rifle, a small pouch of ammunition, a water skin, jerky wrapped in cloth. She stepped outside into the dark, the wind cold on her face. The tracks were fresh, cutting a clean line through the dust toward the ridge road. She followed them, the moon silvering the path ahead. Near midnight, she found their camp, a small fire guttering low, 2 men seated with their backs to her, rifles propped nearby. She moved in the dark as her mother once had. Her steps measured, the rifle balanced against her shoulder. When she stepped into the firelight, the men froze. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice even. One of them rose slowly, hands half raised. "You don't want this fight." She kept the rifle steady. "Where?" The other man's eyes darted toward the river bend. It was all she needed. "Go," she told him. "Tell Mercer the war isn't over." They didn't argue. The one who'd spoken backed away first. Then both vanished into the dark. She stayed still a moment, listening to the night close in again, her pulse a steady drumbeat in her ears. She didn't know yet if she was going to save the stranger or die trying. But the moment she stepped off the road and into the brush, rifle in hand, she understood something deep and unshakable. The girl who'd fixed fences and carried feed was gone. The road ahead belonged to someone else entirely. Rain swept across the land in sheets, blurring the line between earth and sky until the whole world seemed made of shifting gray. She kept low, moving along the ridge that overlooked the river bend, her boots sinking into the mud with each step. Below, through the rain's veil, she saw them, Mercer's men, a half-dozen figures gathered around a dim fire, their coats dark with wet. The stranger was there, his hands bound, his face pale but his back straight. Mercer stood apart, the hood of his oilskin thrown back, his profile carved in the glow of the flames like a coin struck sharp. She lay prone at the ridge's edge, the rifle braced against her shoulder, her breath slow and steady. Every sense was sharpened by the storm. The hiss of rain on the fire, the clink of a boot against stone, the faint shift of the wind carrying voices upward. "Didn't think I'd see that rifle again," Mercer was saying, his tone conversational, almost amused. "Your friend, the one who brought it here, she's not smart enough to know what she's holding." The stranger's voice was hoarse but steady. "You think killing the last of us will erase what you did?" Mercer's smile was a small, cold thing. "I don't need to erase it. Just make sure no one's left to tell it." Her finger curled lightly against the trigger, but she didn't fire. Not yet. The rain would slow the bullet, and the wind could carry it wide. "Patience," the stranger had said. "Let it speak through you." She shifted her aim, watching Mercer's movements. He wasn't just a man. He was the weight of every silence her father had kept, every shadow in her mother's absence, every unmarked grave along the border. Killing him would change nothing. But leaving him alive meant the same history would be written again in blood. One of the guards moved toward the stranger, knife in hand. She exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the storm, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the wind. The guard dropped where he stood. Chaos flared in the camp. Men scattering for cover, Mercer shouting orders. But she was already moving, sliding down the muddy slope, boots cutting deep into the earth. By the time she reached the riverbank, 2 more men had fallen to her fire. Mercer was gone from the circle, using the confusion to retreat toward the tree-line. She cut across the camp, the rifle kicking against her shoulder. The world narrowed to the space between each breath. The stranger was on his feet now, one of the fallen men's pistols in his hand, his bonds cut. "Go after him," he called, nodding toward Mercer. "This is your fight now." She followed the trail through the trees, branches whipping at her face, the rain turning every step into a struggle. Mercer moved fast for a man his age, the glint of his revolver flashing once before he fired. The bullet tore bark inches from her head. She dropped to one knee, steadied herself, and fired back. The shot grazed his arm, spinning him into the mud. He turned toward her, eyes hard even in the half-light. "Your mother had the chance to kill me once," he said, breathing hard. "She didn't take it. She saw something worth sparing. She left you alive," she said, stepping closer, "and you used the years she gave you to keep killing." The rain ran down her face, cold against the heat in her chest. She could see him weighing her, searching for hesitation. "You don't have to be her," he said. "You can walk away." She thought of the people in the canyon, the burned barn, her father's guarded silence. She thought of her mother's hands shaping hers in memory, steadying the rifle. The choice was as sharp and clear as the cold metal under her finger. The shot was clean. Mercer fell back into the mud, his eyes open to the storm. She stood over him for a moment, the rain washing the blood into the earth, until the sound of footsteps drew her back. The stranger emerged from the trees, his pistol lowered. He looked at Mercer's still form, then at her. "It's done," he said. They made their way back to the camp. The remaining militiamen had fled, their fire reduced to a bed of glowing embers. The survivors were already moving to pack what they could, speaking in low tones about places farther west where the militia's shadow had not yet reached. At the farm, dawn broke in pale gold over the wet fields. Her father was on the porch, the lines in his face deeper but softer somehow, as if something long braced against it finally passed. He looked at the rifle slung across her back, but said nothing. She set it by the door, leaning it where it had been before all this began. The days ahead would not be quiet. She knew the land would remember her now, just as it had remembered her mother. But as she walked the fence line in the morning light, the wet grass brushing her boots, she felt no fear. Only the steady pull of the horizon and the knowledge that she had stepped fully into the life the world had been holding for her all along. The road stretched on beyond the last post, and though she did not yet know where it would lead, she understood one thing with perfect clarity. She was no longer just a farmer's daughter. She was the one who had ended Mercer's war.